Well, Angus Robertson is the SNP's Westminster leader and the MP for Murray. Was it a mistake to talk 20?
No, not at all. We're working hard to try and make gains the length and breadth of Scotland. And the reason why we're doing that is in exactly the same reason that we did in the run-up to the 2007 election. So we've got form in that. We set a target, we work towards it, we try and get it. I remember the same doom-monger saying it wasn't going to be possible in 2007. Then we won the election and we held those 20 first-past-the-post seats. We heard the same doom-monger saying that the SNP couldn't win in the European elections, and then that's what we did, and we won in even more. And now we're trying to work, taking absolutely nothing for granted, but working very hard on the ground to try and secure those seats.
Okay.
Now, it's for a reason. And the reason is the more SNP MPs that there are in Westminster, the greater chance that we're going to have to influence things there and to try and block the cuts that Labour, the Conservatives and the Liberal Democrats are all planning.
I suppose Alex Salmond, prior to the Holyrood elections, actually talked about winning 20 extra first-past-the-post seats, which he didn't quite achieve, but that's not to take away from that particular election victory. Are you saying that you will win 20 seats, that you will get that 15+% national swing?
Well, we're working towards it, Glenn. I think one of the most important lessons in politics is to have a degree of humility, and when you're predicting what your targets are, they're not things that you say you are definitely going to win. You're going to work towards winning them, and that's why we are working the length and breadth of Scotland, speaking to voters and explaining how important it is for the SNP to do well.
Okay.
Most of the opinion polls are suggesting that there will be a hung or balanced parliament, and that is a very strong reason for people to vote SNP, to have that direct voice, that direct influence, so that we can champion the issues that people care about.
I want to get onto that business of a hung parliament in just a moment, but I do recall that prior to the 2005 UK election, Alex Salmond was confident enough to place a bet on the SNP winning 6 or more seats. What bet would you place this time round?
I unfortunately, or fortunately perhaps, Glenn, don't bet. So, sorry to disappoint you there. What I do know, though, is that because of what I'm hearing from around the country, there is good reason to believe that the SNP will make really strong progress, and if we do that, then we will make gains the length and breadth of Scotland. Now, it's not just for the sake of it, it's not one party being up and others being down, it's about having an influence where decisions are made, so we can influence those decisions at Westminster to try and make sure that bad decisions aren't made, and that we might be able to influence things to bring some real gains for Scotland, because unfortunately the UK parties don't really think about Scotland that much. It's the SNP that does, and we need more MPs to be able to make that case as effectively at Westminster as possible.
But are you going to be local champions, or are you going to be Westminster warriors raging against the machine? Surely you can't be both.
Well, the SNP track record has shown that not only are SNP MPs very effective standing up for the issues that matter in constituencies, whether it's Angus MacNeil helping protect defence jobs in Uist, Mike Weir working to try and keep post offices in his Angus constituency. I could go on with my colleagues. All of us work very hard on the matters that matters most to our constituents, but on the national stage we also challenge the powers that be in Westminster in a way that other parties don't. So we are the ones that are leading the charge against the waste of £100 billion to be spent on Trident nuclear missiles. It's the SNP that was leading the charge when it came to the issue of Iraq. It was the SNP that was calling for an inquiry. It was the SNP that was calling for the Prime Minister to give evidence. All of these things happened. That's why electing more SNP MPs is a good thing. Not only do we champion the things that matter at a community level, but we also champion the things that matter at a national level, and that's why more SNP MPs will make a real difference.
More Nats, less cuts is the ungrammatical slogan. But what sort of deal-making would you be prepared to do if, for instance, you were able to negotiate with a Prime Minister leading a minority government that there would be no cuts to the Scottish budget in 2010-11? What would you give in return?
Well, we're working very closely with our colleagues in Plaid Cymru, the Party of Wales. That obviously means that we have a larger bloc, a larger say at Westminster, and with more gains, a stronger say. And we're currently working through the areas, the priorities that we would like to help protect advance in both Scotland and Wales, and indeed for the UK as a whole. So you'll have to hold the page on that particular story, Glenn, and we'll come back to you when that list of priorities is formulated.
No, sure, but I was just really asking what you were prepared to give in return. I mean, what do you put on the table in negotiations with a future Conservative or Labour Prime Minister?
Well, it's very instructive to look at what's happened in the Scottish Parliament because, of course, we have great experience in Scotland of a minority government depending on other parties on an issue-by-issue basis to get legislation and votes passed. That's what happens in Holyrood at the moment, and that's what would happen in Westminster in those circumstances. So it depends on an issue-by-issue basis. It depends on the relative strengths of the parties. So you can't expect me to talk about every single potential scenario now. But
there's a formula that's quite often used in other countries, confidence and supply, where you would guarantee to help the government get its budget through, where you would support the government if it came to a confidence vote. That sort of thing?
Indeed, that is one of the options. I am in a fortunate position to be able to confirm that the SNP will not be seeking cabinet places, not ministerial posts, not ministerial mondeos. That's not what it's about. It's by issue. Confidence and supply is one of the models. Of course it is. All of this is predicated on the results of the election. We shouldn't get too far ahead of ourselves. The result of the election will be determined by the electorate, and that's why, through your good selves, we're communicating with the public and saying the more votes for the SNP will give us that power to influence decisions for the better, cutting the plans that Labour, Conservative and Liberal Democrats have to reduce public spending in frontline services. That's where more Nats does mean fewer cuts, and that's why every single SNP vote is important at this election.
Why wouldn't it be better for voters to help one of the big parties form a majority government strong enough not to make compromises and to take the tough decisions that are going to be necessary?
But we have to deal with the realities as they fall, and the majority of opinion polls in recent months all indicate that because of where the relative strengths are of the parties, that a hung parliament, a balanced parliament, is the most likely option. Now, this is the world as we find it, not as the SNP would wish it, although I am pleased that we are talking about a scenario in which the SNP could potentially hold the balance of power. Now, that's not a certainty, but we have to plan in case that happens. So voters the length and breadth of Scotland know that this is a real possibility and that every single SNP vote will influence the result of the election in a good way for Scotland. The more votes there are, the more MPs there are, the more influence we can exercise, and that is a tremendous thing. It'll be really good for communities, it'll be really good for families, and we will be able to champion the things that matter for voters, but only if people vote SNP, rather than wasting it on London-based parties who want to cut things left, right and centre.
You said that the world was perhaps not as you would wish it in terms of this hung parliament. Would it be better, in general terms, is government stronger where there is an overall majority?
Well, we've had strong government under Tony Blair that took us into an illegal and immoral war in Iraq. London governments tend to think they've been given a blank cheque to decide whatever they want, regardless of what the electorate actually think or would like. So no, I don't think that that's the best result. I think the best result is a parliament that reflects the will and wishes of the people. And at the present time, it would appear that people wish there to be no party with an overall majority, so we ensure that stability is served by agreement between parties, bringing together the best ideas, and the SNP is willing and able to play our part if that's what the electorate wishes to see.
Do you think the minority government in Scotland is a good example for the UK, given the amount that Alex Salmond has had to chuck out in order to stay in office and get what he can through?
Well, it's very tempting to say, of course, that I would wish the SNP to have an absolute majority so we could get all of our policy platform through. And it is true that some important policies that the SNP would wish to have gone through didn't, because other parties stopped that happening.
So it's not a great model then, is it?
But at the same time, it is also fair to say that compromises have been struck and important pieces of legislation have been able to go through. Changes to the budget process have been sought. Stability has been found, and that is a good thing. So I think there are pros and cons from pretty much every scenario. What I do know for an absolute certainty is the London parties do not have Scotland as a priority. If we want Scottish priorities to be important at Westminster, the only way to secure that is by electing SNP MPs who will always stand up for the Scottish interests. So people watching this programme will know by now that the SNP is in a position to influence things at Westminster, not just fight for and articulate the issues that are important for people, actually influence the process of government. That is a good thing. That is a reason why more people should vote SNP and have confidence that that will bring advantages to people in this country.
Angus Robertson, leader of the SNP at Westminster, thanks very much.